I've forgotten all Python syntax, to be honest. I know how to print. I know how to print and get input.
Come on, you just used it this summer. All right, guys. So we're going to keep progressing on. Hopefully this is no longer review. Although if you took my Java course, we hit arrays a little bit. Other Java teachers may not. So we are going to do Chapter 9. Excuse me, Chapter 7. Chapter 7. No, that's not true. It is Chapter 9. What am I thinking? Okay, so we're skipping 8. 8's a good read, but we're not going to talk about it. So, as usual, I recommend downloading the PowerPoint and actually reading it with the PowerPoint. What is this asking me? Oh, come on. Stop it.
Just cancel.
Alrighty. Arrays. Demo for Eclipse. Interesting. Okay, so what is an array? An array is a contiguous list of values. What do I mean by contiguous? It means that they're stored all one after the other in memory. So if you have 17 test scores stored, then in one place in memory, or here they have phone numbers, you have a phone number, and then in the next place in memory you have another phone number, and you have the next place in memory you have a phone number, whatever. So it's just a straight shot. More complex data types, like array lists and stacks and queues, are not necessarily arranged in one place in memory, whereas arrays are. Arrays are the most primitive and the fastest data structure for holding a list of values. Since they're all contiguous in memory, if you need to pull up data, process an entire list as fast as possible, then speed-wise, memory access-wise, they're the fastest. On the other hand, programming time is awfully incredibly important, and so there may be other tools other than arrays in which you want to use. So in this language, unlike C++, an array is actually a class. So it's got some other data. It doesn't have any methods, but it does contain its own size. And if you use C++ arrays, you remember we had to do some monkey business to get the size of the array. We had to use size of to determine how many bytes the array was using, and then we had to divide it by the size of the array element type. Fortunately, we don't have to do this. We could query this array right here, and it would tell us, oh, I have 5 elements. So array elements are accessed by their index number. But as always with computers, we start counting with 0 rather than 1. So if this is an array called phone list, this is phone list element 0. This will look real familiar to you Python and C++ programmers. Phone list 1. Phone list index 2. I'll usually say subscript. I'm not sure where I picked up that habit, but phone list subscript 2. That just means type the square braces and put the index number in there. So if this has a size of 5, you can access elements 0 through 4. If you try to access element 5, in some languages it'll work, but it won't give you any valid data. Java will just blow up with an exception. Won't let you do it. So if the array is 10 elements long, you can go 0 through 9. So effectively you can go up from 0 to n-1, where n is the length of the array. And so when you're writing loops to process them, you'll have to remember that. So once you've declared an array, you assign values just like that. Phone list index 0 is equal to that number. If you want to print out the second one in the array, because the first one was 0, then you would system.out.println phone list 1. So here they've made a program called contact list. How many contact numbers would you like to enter? You read in that size and you create an array of that size. We can do this. Let's roll our own though, rather than just blindly copy what they have here. So everybody else in here already launched, and that means I did not. So here we go. So we're going to be doing tutorial C. Looks like I've misspelled tutorial there. Tutorial. All right. So D is our current homework assignment. However your naming convention has been. File, new project, Java, Java application, tutorial D, or however you've been naming them. Tell you what, click this thing, use dedicated folder for storing libraries. What that does is it stops it from putting, no, never mind. Don't do that. That's not doing what I would hope it would do. I want us to stop removing I want us to remove the package declaration from all of our programs from now on. So we're just gonna do that. You got a question?
Oh, I was asking if that's what I was asking is what you said. How you said you were hoping the use dedicated folder would stop it from putting it in a package.
It seemed like there was an option right there in earlier versions of NetBeans that would not do the package. I don't think that's it. So I'm going to skip that. You could remove the package right there. Look where it says, this is tiny print on the screen, but for you people sitting through the lecture. You see where it says tutorial dot? If you remove that tutorial dot, it'll remove the package statement. So I'm just going to erase all of that stuff. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Don't change that. I'm totally wrong. Leave that alone. Cancel and redo the whole thing if you have to. Okay, I'm just going to remove the package declaration myself. So I'm going to go into projects, and if you're creating this in something else other than NetBeans, whatever, and drag, well, I'm going to delete the package declaration right there. That gives me a little error up here. I'm going to click on the error and say move class to correct folder. Ta-da, now we don't have a package declaration. Why is that important? So that if you open it up in another editor, like TextPad or whatever, you could actually compile and run it. That package declaration will mess TextPad up. Alrighty, so this is our application. This is our tutorial D for CIT2613, September 6, and your name. And what are we going to learn? Learn about arrays. This gray color for the comments is kind of hard to read, I've heard, so I'm going to pump up the color to something else. If you want to change the colors of your editor, you can do that. Tools, options, fonts and colors, and I want my color something else other than light gray. I'm going to click custom and just pick a nice blue or something like that. I don't know if that's good enough. That teal. You can spend hours customizing these things. It's not really.
Way to make the background?
You want the background dark. There are themes in order to do this. I don't really remember how to do that. Okay, like there's one called City Lights and one called Norway Today. You could choose those. I'm not going to demonstrate those. I find that once you try to make a dark background, you spend hours tweaking it. So I'm not going to do that now. But yeah, play with that. All right, there we go. At least the writing's green. Hopefully that's better. I'm going to delete this comment here. We don't need that comment. We're going to put our stuff here. So what is our application going to do? It's going to ask the user for the number of phone numbers. Then it's going to declare an array of that size. And then it's going to use a loop to let the user enter that many phone numbers. And then it's going to print the phone numbers out. But we're doing a lot there. Let's do just a few shortcut arrays first, a few simple ones. Let's declare an array of colors. String colors, square brace, in square brace, that indicates that it's an array, is equal to new string. How many colors do we want? 3. That's a little bit more complicated than it was in C++. Certainly more complicated than it was in Python.
Does it matter? Can you brackets go before your variable name? Does that still work?
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
Either syntax is correct. I don't really have a strong preference for either one. I think the book shows it like that.
I just didn't know why the book showed it that way. It just looks weird to me. I prefer the way we usually do it.
Oh, the book shows it like that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll do it the way the book shows it. But yeah, usually actually I put it after, honestly. Some textbooks go one way, some go the other. Both of those are valid. Braces before or after.
You can
I
just
think it's more consistent with like your methods if you put it after it.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, it is, yeah. Okay, more consistent looking. So let's assign some colors. Colors subscript 0 is equal to, we're going to do RGB, red. Now let's write a loop that's going to print our colors out. There are two kinds of loops. You can use what's known as a for loop, or you could use a for each loop. I think the book uses a different name for a for each loop. Enhanced for loop, something like that. We're just going to use a for loop at this point. So you can also use while loops, do loops, any kind of loop will work. For int, I just need a counter variable. I for index is equal to 0. I is less than. Now I could hard code 3 because I know I have 3 strings, but that's dumb. Instead, we should always ask the array for its size. So colors dot length, semicolon, and then I++. So you see what that's going to do? Colors dot length is set to 3. So this is going to count 0, 1, and 2. Don't make that less than or equal. That'd be a problem. This is not a method. It's not a function, so we don't have to put parentheses after it. It's just a property. The arrays class doesn't have any methods, but it does have properties. Is that true? If I type in colors dot, it seems to list a lot of things that are methods. So that little statement in the slide saying that it's not a method, nah, that's not true. Okay. Well, anyways, now let's print it out. System.out.println. I'm going to make it a printf. System.out.printf color %d equals %s \n. I'm going to make my text bold and see if that helps things leap out if I can. Alrighty. So I have two placeholders, D and S. Well, this is going to be the index value, I, and this is going to be the array at that element, colors subscript I, colors square brace I. Alright, is this a good program? Not really, because we've only filled in one color. I want you to see what it looks like with not completely filled. So if I run it, I'm going to scroll down a little bit so that I can keep this on the screen and then see our output. It says color 1 is equal to red. Excuse me, color 0 is red, 1 is null, 2 is null. Why is that? Well, this array is a list of references, but all the references just point to null until we start creating some strings. If you create an array of integers, they'll all be 0. If you create an array of doubles, floats, it'll all be 0.0. If you create an array of booleans, it'll all be false. But if it's an array of objects, and a string is an object, it'll be to null. How do we get around that? Well, we could do some monkeying here and say if colors, parentheses, I, not equal null, then print it out. But I'm going to skip that. At this point, I'm just going to want to go ahead and fill in the other two colors. Colors 1 is equal to green. Colors 2 is equal to blue. Wonder how they decided that order. I guess they're in, yeah, they're in order of the spectrum. R has the longest wavelengths, G has shorter, and B has the shortest. Okay. So there's our, we now have an array that's got 3 colors in it. So it's no longer printing null. If we're just going to hard code values like that, this is tedious. There's a much shorter syntax for declaring an array with a set of pre-filled elements. Let's declare another array called more colors. And I'm just going to hit the equal sign. I'm not going to do new though. Instead, I'm going to use an array initializer. An array initializer is a series of values separated by commas between 2 curly braces. So what are more colors? Add some yourself. Purple, gold, teal, whatever. So you kind of see the advantage? If you already knew how many colors there were going to be and what the words were going to be, then this is 4 lines of code, and we just replace this with 1 line of code. So I'd rather do it like that if I already have a predetermined discrete set of values that I know that I'm going to want to use. You'll see me use this syntax a lot if I'm demonstrating arrays. Let's print those out. But this was our for loop. I'm going to add a comment here that says for loop, or print array using a for loop. Now I'm going to print it out using a so-called enhanced for loop, which I'm going to call a for each loop. Print array using a for each loop. Now in C#, it actually uses the words for each. Every other language that has adopted this syntax does not. So for, now what kind of data is this? These are strings. So for every string, and I'm just picking a random variable name, S, I could choose color or something like that. Every string in the more colors array, system.out.println, that color. Or more colors equals, I don't have an index number, so I can't do this thing where we were printing out the index number where it said 1, 2, and 3. Why? Because as this loop runs, it's copying each element in turn into S. You can see the syntax is pretty streamlined compared to this one, right? For this item in the list, print that item. That's a lot cleaner than this. I would use this unless I can't. And the I can't part of that is if you actually have to change the values of the array. We can use an array, we can use a for loop that looks like this to change the values of the array, but we can't do that because S is just a copy of the element, and even if we changed S, we would not be changing the original array. Similar to our lectures from last week. You have 2 references, but it's just a copy of it. Alrighty, so let's run that. Let's see if it worked. All right, purple, gold, and teal. Red, green, and blue. So loops and arrays go hand in hand. That's why the very first thing I showed you, besides defining an array and filling it with data, is doing something with it with a loop. For example, you might have a series of numbers that you want to add up. Let's declare an array of ints. Int, I'm just going to call them nums for numbers, is equal to, and I'm going to fill in those numbers. 1, 5, 9, not periods because these are ints. 1, 4, whatever, as many numbers as you want. Don't have to be my numbers. So we use an initializer list. That means we didn't have to use the new keyword, which we did up here. We now have, it looks like it's got about 7 or 8 values in it. Let's add them up. In order to add them, we're going to need an accumulator variable, one that will hold the total. So If we wind up doing math on it, averages and stuff like that, we may as well make it a floating point total, in my opinion. So double total is equal to 0. Now let's loop through those numbers. For every int, for every element in the nums array, I like trying to reserve I for an index, which is what that is. And then if we're actually printing the element out itself, not using I. But I and int would have, they seemed like to go hand in hand, so I was tempted to do that. Alrighty, total plus equals n. So system.out.println, can we just print the array in one fell swoop like we can in Python? So print nums, and then let's print out the sum. System.out.println, sum equals, I should have used the word total. I'm going to go back and revise that to total. What's the difference? In some languages, sum is a reserved word, and so I try to steer myself away from using it. Okay. All right, look what happened when I printed out my array. All it did is print a memory address. Not useful, but it did calculate the sum. What if we wanted to print out the string version of the array? What I mean by that is I don't want to write a for loop to print the array. I wonder if there's a function in the arrays class with an S. There's a helper class called arrays. So arrays dot toString, and the array that we want to print out is the nums array. Let's see if that works. There we go. That's a nice, quick, handy-dandy way of printing out an array. If I tell you write a loop that prints out the array. Don't just do toString, right? Print it out with a loop. But if you just want to print the array itself, you can use arrays.toString. Arrays is a helper class, just like capital I integer and capital D double and stuff like that. So it's got a whole bunch of functions. I'm going to look at the Java docs for the array class. So I'm going to double click on the word arrays, right click, and do show Java doc. And here we go. Here's all of the documentation of it. Copy equals fill. You want to fill the entire array with a specific value. All sorts of things. Looks like there are sort methods.
So like in any language, a list or an array, neither of those are all, I guess, they're not primitive data types, but
In C++, an array, absolutely. The question is, are these not primitive data types? And in Java, no. An array is actually a very primitive little class, but it's not a primitive data type. So it's not a primitive. And you know that because it can hold things other than pure numbers. It can hold, class elements, objects, and stuff like that. In C++, it pretty much is just a primitive data type, which is why you can't even query it to get the size of the array. Okay, so go ahead and show me a loop that'll print out the nums array, one per line. Go ahead and do that. So printing it out. If I want to print it out one per line, I could use a for loop or for each loop. I'm going to use a for loop for this one. It's always good to remember the basics. And if I'm using a for loop, I need an index counter. I is equal to 0. I is less than the length of the nums array. So nums.length. I++. And then the next line, system.out.println nums subscript I, nums square brace I. Test that, build it, and run it. That did it. Now I want to print it in a way that it kind of looks like their toString did, where it's all on one line. So I'm going to do a for each loop for that. You could do it either way. For every element, for every integer in the nums array, system.out.println, but not print line. I don't want it to go to the next line. How about just print? Print E followed by a space, so that they'll all be separated by spaces. And then after that for loop is done, let's print a blank lines. System.out.println. So there we go. All of our numbers are all lined up on one line. All of the numbers are lined up that way. And you know how to do this conceptually already, right? We're just not going to the next line since we didn't use print line. If we wanted them to be in a special format with a special number of spaces between them, we would use a printf. So I'm going to change that to a printf. Printf, and then I need a placeholder. Percent, let's make each one occupy 3 spaces. %3d followed by the variable that fills in the placeholder. So %3d, comma e. All right, why would we do that? Well, we might want to print a whole bunch of columns in a row, and we might want them to be positioned nicely. We'll see that with two-dimensional arrays. You can have 2D arrays, like a spreadsheet. You have X columns and Y columns or whatever. You know, you have columns and you have rows. Those are two-dimensional arrays. Right now, we're doing one-dimensional arrays. So if we go back up here and look at this, we know how to do some of this stuff. We know how to declare an array of that size. We know how to ask the user for something. So we could ask them for the size of the array, and then we could allocate the array. But instead of hard coding a value there, we'd use a variable that they filled in. And then use a loop to let the user enter that many phone numbers. Well, we didn't do that. We hard coded all of our values. But we know how to use a loop, right? And we know how to use a scanner to read stuff in. So I really think we know enough about this to do this. I'm going to cut that and paste it down here. New territory here. Still before the brace, of course. The end brace. One thing I always do, if I remember to, is to go and add a comment on my terminating brace saying end main and then end of class. That way, I can just kind of, when I'm scrolling down, I know what I'm doing. So ask the user for the number of phone numbers. We're going to need a scanner.
Quick question about the scanner.
Yes, sir.
Can it take any other argument besides system.in?
Yeah, you can read a scanner. You can use a scanner to read a file.
Okay.
And you can use a scanner to read from an internet socket or something like that. So system.in is not the only thing you can scan.
And system.in is, I guess,
the keyboard.
The normal way to get input?
Yep. For a console application, yes. Okay. So scanner sc is equal to new scanner system.in. I should go up to the top and add the import statement for it. I could let it add the import statement, but as soon as I start telling people to do that, then they start choosing create class instead. Never, never, never choose create class if that's the choice from the pop-up list of helpful things. Why? That probably means that you made a typo. Okay, scanner with 3 ends. Well, they seem to kind of work, but say I didn't have that there yet. You know. Okay, so I've totally botched it. Oh, create a class. Hey, that sounds cool. Alrighty, now I'm going to go and start using it. No. Don't do that. Don't click on the little error message and choose create class until you are absolutely sure that's what you want to do. So you could click on the error and say add import for java.util.scanner, or you can come up here and type it. Import java.util.scanner with a capital S. And you all know how to do that. You've had Java 1. Okay, so system.out.println. How many phone numbers in list? Int size. Size is equal to sc.nextInt, capital I. Now let's prompt them. We're going to need a loop. For, and you can't use a for each loop. Do you remember when I said if you're using a for each loop, you can't change the contents of the array? Okay, I'm putting the cart before the horse. How do you enter data if you don't have an array to begin with?
That is true.
So let's make an array for the phone numbers. And I think the PowerPoint here just uses ints for the phone numbers. I'd rather use something that would support dashes and stuff like that. So I'm going to use strings. String phone nums, square brace in square brace, is equal to new string. And how many do we want?
How many they enter.
Right, we're right.
Size.
However many they entered, so we're going to do size. Now we need our for loop. For int I is equal to 0, I is less. We could just do size, you know. We have it right there. Or we ask the array for his length. I prefer to do that even if I see the size variable right there. Phone nums dot length I++. Let's print out a message telling them that we want a phone number. System.out.println, enter phone number, and let's go ahead and print out I. So it'll say phone number 1, phone number 2, phone number 3, and stuff like that.
Do you want to do I+1?
Yes, we want to do I+1. I was going to ask you all that question.
Sorry.
All right. So what is it going to do? If you type in 5, it's going to say phone number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Users don't like seeing phone number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. They'd rather see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to tack 1 on there, right? Like that. Now we need to let them enter the phone number. String s is equal to sc.next, just next. This is kind of nagging me. If they put spaces in and stuff like that, that's going to mess up, but I'm going to forget that. I may resort to my usual practice of using next line for everything. If you start mixing next lines and next ints and stuff like that, then you get into a problem. Alrighty, and then we need to add that to the array. So phone nums at index I is equal to that string that we just got. Could you shorten that? Yeah, we could. We could just do this. I could take sc.next and put that there. Do I have a preference for doing it this way? I kind of like the way that looks just because it's kind of reminding you that we are creating a brand new string and then storing a reference to it in the array. But that both of them would work equally well and do just about the exact same thing. All right. Let's run it. Let's only say like 2 phone numbers so it won't take forever to test. How many phone numbers in the list? Enter phone number 1. Enter phone number 2. Build successful. Cool. Alrighty. We're going to need to talk about parallel arrays. Because what if I wanted to associate names with the phone numbers, you know? Joe Jackson is phone number, 1. Billy Bob is phone number 2 and stuff like that. To do that, we need parallel arrays. But I want to go back to the PowerPoint before we start doing anything like that. So let's print this out in a nice tidy little list. So system.out.printf %.3 and I'm not going to make it that complex. System.out.print. Yeah, we need a for loop to print them out, obviously. And if we want to print out the numbers, we have to have the index number as well, which means we're not going to use a for each. So for every I is equal to 0, I is less than the length, phone nums dot length, I plus plus, system.out.printf. Let's do %d or %2d, because what if they entered 20 phone numbers? We'd like it to be lined up all the way. And then followed by %, it's a string, so just %s, and then a new line, a /n. So the index number, but we want to add 1 so that they see phone numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I plus 1, and the phone number itself, phone nums at I. So I'm going to test it. Down here, it asks me how many phone numbers are in the list. 12. Enter some phone numbers. I'm just going to type some garbage. And there we go. There's our output. We could prettify it a little bit more. You know, we could put column headers up at the top and stuff like that, but that's definitely enough. I think we have fulfilled the requirements of this. What if they wanted to change one of the phone numbers? Change phone number 7. We would have to prompt them for which index number to change, but they'd probably type in 6 when it was really element number 5 because we've been adding 1 to it. Then we'd have to use the scanner to read in a new value, and then we would reassign that element. Yeah, I think I'm going to hold off doing anything like that for now. We have fulfilled this. Ask the user for the number of phone numbers. Declare an array. Use a loop to let the user enter the phone numbers, and then print the phone numbers out. We've done all 5 of those things. 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those things. So, using Eclipse. An array is a variable. It must be declared before you can use it. Element type, square braces, element and name. You're right. So in the book, they show using the square braces before the variable name. Int, IDs. Double, work hours. String, names. And now that I look at it, I see why they're doing that. They're saying work hours is not merely a double, it's an array of doubles. So I'm going to adopt that syntax in the rest of my demos. You know, if I wanted to, I could come back and fix that. String square brace colors is equal to new string, like that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go, you know, and tediously fix all of those. But that is the syntax that I'm going to follow from now on whenever I demo this stuff. So an array of IDs, an array of work hours, an array of names. When you want to create a new array, you have to do new, followed by the element type, followed by the array size. Phone list is equal to new long, subscript 10. Quite often people do those in one statement. That's what I demoed. Long phone list equals to new long. Why break it up? I can't think of why I would want to break it up unless I just wanted to put a comment here saying what this was. a list of phone numbers. Yeah, like that. Then it might be useful to break them up so that you had your variables all declared, one per line, a comment per line, and then you actually start use them. Works either way. So this goes out and it allocates enough space for 10 longs.
This is a weird question. I probably don't think you can do it. But can you make an array
The length of how much memory you have on your computer, and will it occupy all of that space?
Not really. Java isn't the question is, could you create an array that occupied all the memory in your computer? And what would happen is arrays are allocated off the heap. The Java runtime engine, the virtual machine, has a limit to the amount of memory that the heap can set. When you run the program, you can increase the size of the heap. So conceivably, you could create a really, really large array and then do command line parameters when you invoke it, tell the Java runtime engine that it needs to have that much memory for the heap. But you can't query the computer and ask, okay, you have 4 gigabytes, I want you to use all of that. So yeah. So it's legal to combine an array's declaration, creation, and assignment in one fell swoop. And we know how to do this anyway, so I'm not going to type it out. A single statement that declares, creates, and assigns a 100 element for book titles. Since they're book titles, they would be strings. The array initializer. Instead of doing equals new and then followed by the type and the size, you instead do equals curly brace and you put your list here. So your students. String array of students is equal to, and you initialize it with this list. Saeed, Odebek, and Selam. When an array initializer is used, the size of the array equals the number of elements in the initializer list. You don't use the new operator in that case. Array default values. Remember when we printed our array of strings? That's because strings are reference types. And they were all initialized as null initially. So when we printed out our colors, it just said null, null, null. Integers are initialized to 0. Floating points are initialized to 0. Booleans are initialized to false. The array length property. You declare your array like that, and then you print out the length. Dot length is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, meaning that you can access elements 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We've seen dot length before as a string method. It's worth mentioning that a common source of frustration, if you've just been doing a chapter on strings, is that people tend to do this. String name is equal to, Joe Bob, and then they want the length of it. And size, I think I've already used size, whatever, SZ is equal to name dot length. You have to put the parentheses there. But you have an array, like phone nums or whatever, int p size is equal to phone nums dot length. It's just a property, it's not a method. So, parentheses for strings, no parentheses for arrays. You just have to get that right. If you don't get it right, you'll get a compilation error. You'll figure out how to fix it. This helpful error fixing thing over here is completely giving us the wrong answer. Split into declaration, that doesn't do a darn thing. So you can't really depend upon the little red error helper over here. What's the problem? The problem is that it's a property, not a method. So we need to get rid of that. The parentheses there.
I wonder why
why didn't they make a method that did it? Yeah, I don't know.
Why didn't they make length a property of a string?
Well, it's a method instead of a property. Why are they not consistent between the two? I don't know. I don't have a good philosophical answer to that.
Consistency is not key.
So a partially filled array. A partially filled array is when you use some of an array's elements, but not all. If you have a partially filled array, you have to keep track of the number of filled elements. For example, what if we gave them the option to bail out of the loop early if they got tired of entering phone numbers? Enter phone number I. Let's add a print statement to that loop. The for I is phone numbers. System.out.println or -1 to exit. And then, before we store it in the array, after we call sc.next, we need to see if they typed in -1. It's a string, so we're going to have to use dot equals. If s dot equals -1, then break out of our loop early. Else, add it to that. Now, I'm not going to put an else, because if you're breaking it, anything underneath it is an implied else already. Okay, so let's run it. How many phone numbers are on our list? 5. I'm going to type in 3 phone numbers, and then I'm going to hit -1. And then we print it out, our array. See that? Prints out 3 phone numbers and then some nulls. And the user sees some nulls and they're going to complain. There's 2 ways to fix that. One is that our for loop could check to see if that element was equal to null before it printed it out. The other is to keep track of how many numbers you have entered. So what we could do is we could declare a variable that we incremented every time they successfully entered a new phone number. In which case it's starting to look more like a while loop than anything else. But int entries is equal to 0. How many entries do we have in our list? So I'm going to put that above our for int I is equal to 0, I is less than the phone nums, not length, whatever. Each time they do enter a good number, each time we store something into the phone list, the last thing in our loop is going to be entries plus plus. So by the time we're done with this, we have a variable now that tells us how many items are in the phone list. If they filled it out completely, it'll be, the number of items in the whole thing. 5 or whatever. But if they bail out early, then it'll be a number less than the size of the array. 3, 2, 1, whatever. So instead of going out to dot length, we want to go out to the number of entries.
Oh, and you also just proved your point of why you should store it in a new string variable.
Right. Very good point. Very good point. Instead of just doing this, I wouldn't have been able to check to see if that value equaled -1 before doing anything with it.
It actually, once you put -1 in it and do the if that, it stores it still.
Right.
So
It would be stored there. Okay, so let's run it now. How many phone numbers in a list? 6, but I'm only going to enter 3. So I type in a -1, and it prints out 3 phone numbers. That's called a partially filled array. The array has room for 6 items, but we only filled in elements 0, 1, and 2. We only filled in the first 3. So we have to carry around with us this counter that indicates how many entries were actually filled. The other way you could have done it, I'm going to add it and then remove it, is you could have changed your print statement to look like this. If phone nums subs I is not equal to null, then print it out. That'd be a really cheaty, hacky way of doing it, but it would work. Why am I saying it's a cheaty, hacky way of doing it? Because only references get set to null. If you're doing an array of doubles or floats or whatever, you're not going to be able to check to see if they're null. They're just going to have the value 0 in them. 0 is usually a quite valid piece of data. So with that in mind, I'm going to delete that.
I think you should leave it to us and let us figure it out.
Yeah, I'm just going to give a hint. How to calculate the min and the max value of an array. Up here, we had an array of numbers, right? It looked like that. You don't have to type this. And then we had a for loop that added them all up, right? For every element in nums, total plus equals e, something like that. You're going to do the same thing, except you're going to be looking for the minimum or the maximum. So you would need to declare a variable, max, and set it equal to the first element in the list, in the array, like that. And then every time you get a new number, you're going to check to see if it's greater than max. If max is less than the number we're currently looking at, max is now equal to that number. That's how you calculate the maximum value. The version to calculate the minimum is very similar to that. And I actually do think you ought to type that in. So go ahead and do that. So what the homework is going to be, I always seem to come up with the same thing. We're going to do average rainfall over 12 months. So write a program that asks for 12 numbers, rainfall amounts, and then print them all out, print the sum, print the average, which I didn't even show you how to do the average, but you know how to calculate the average, right? I'll give you a strong hint in just a minute. And then print the minimum and then the maximum rainfall. Now, it doesn't have to be fancy and print the name of the months and things like that. It should, but that involves parallel arrays, a concept that we haven't hit yet. So that's going to be the homework. Ask the user to enter 12 numbers representing monthly rainfall measurements. Display the 12 numbers. Display the total of the numbers. Add them all up, the sum. Display the minimum and the max. And then display the average. And how do you calculate the average? Average is just equal to the total divided by the numbers of elements. So nums.length or whatever, rainfall.length, whatever, something like that. That's how you get the average. All right, that makes sense, y'all? Okay. We'll make a better version of it next week, where it'll display the month. Enter the rainfall for January. Enter the rainfall for February. And I know that you've already done that in my other classes in Python and C++, but not everybody took my Python and C++. So maybe new for some of y'all. Alrighty, so that's it. I will upload this as homework assignment 4. I'll make it somewhat prettier. The final version will be prettier, of course. Yeah, for Pete's sake. All right. Wrong one. So let's make a Dropbox for today's work and for the homework. This will be homework D. Remind me what chapter we're on. 9. Can't do that. Somebody needs to be watching this. I should have paused the recording. And what day was this? This was based on September 6th lecture. All right, and then homework 4. So one-dimensional array, average, min, max of an array, and the sum. All right, so there's our drop boxes. Upload today's tutorial into D, and then when you get the homework done, put it into Dropbox 4. Kind of looking at it, I may want to bump the date back a little bit farther. I don't know, because there's a difference of a week there. I guess that's because we missed Monday. And then the lecture got lost, and so I moved the date back to that one. Is that why? I'm going to leave it though. It's a simple assignment. You got to be able to get it done over the weekend or whatever. Get it done by next Wednesday.